I think Token 2049 this year, compared with last year, I think it's more activities. So I saw lots of friends here from different part of the world, such as Dubai, Hong Kong, the US, Europe, Russia, and Australia. So I think it's a very good connection platform for all of the industry players.
I think Alex and the team at Token 2049, we've known them since they kind of started the conference in Hong Kong, and we've worked and supported them throughout. We think they've done a great job of growing the conference. And, you know, it's interesting, I was in Korea last week, and other than the people who lived in Seoul, pretty much everyone was Korea was kind of on their way to Token 2049. So it's quite incredible the amount of just global talent and industry leaders that the conference attracts.
Oh gosh, I mean, I was here for the first time last year and was so impressed with Singapore that I convinced many more people on my team to come. It's been busy for sure, much more lively than I expected in a bear market. But what in particular has struck me is the engagement from institutional teams.
Token 2049 is always high quality and big conference. I personally think it is probably the biggest crypto conference in Asia Pacific area, and also the most important one for specific reasons. Well, we work with many different projects. We work with KOLs, medias from different regions, and this is the time when we have a chance to meet them in person and have personal conversation.
For me personally, I always find these events amazingly interesting, and even though we're in what would be considered, typically speaking, a bear market, right? I find that these events always give me a great sense of hope, because everybody here is working so hard on building and creating, and we're constantly improving as a whole, as an industry, constantly improving and building on top of everything that has been done before. So these events are good because you get to come, you get to meet with people, you get to see what else is happening in the industry, and you get to share what you're working on as well. And finding ways to synergize and work together is, I think, the hallmark of all of these events, and Token 2049 has always been at the forefront of this.
今年我觉得更明显的就是两个大的趋势，一个是机构化，一个是合规化。The bull run is that from the retail investing in cryptocurrency, and the conversation is really around the prices of this token and that token. And then I think now that it's starting to move beyond finance, and I think that will be the cause or the push that will be the next wave of the bull run if it happens next, or someone says next year.
That we've spent a decade building the piping and the underground for what's going to be built on top. And I think the next trend is to focus on consumers and consumer apps, consumer integration. And there's a whole lot of consumers in Asia, so I think that's probably going to be the right focus of where to invest and what to be looking into for this region.
I think we can observe kind of like a very interesting blend here in this region in East Asia, of people being very tech savvy, very interested in technology, so very advanced as a society, if you will, and at the same time sticking to some or preserving some traditional ways of doing partnerships and collaborations, where you really get to know your counterpart. When you spend some time with them, you connect on some, maybe on personal level.
I would say that more, especially in the infrastructure space, which is what I focus on, more of the innovation is happening in North America, I think. Many of the projects that are sort of leading in the infrastructure-based projects are from North America. But in Asia, I think there are a lot of focus on applications. So I think that's sort of the rough division that I see.
So the US, I mean, in Texas, I think it's actually very similar to China, where there's a lot of interest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So Texas has really adopted Bitcoin mining. Why? Because they're very used to oil, they're used to electricity, and oil being the foundation of electricity, and Bitcoin needs electricity as its core foundation. So the hash rates are defined, and the successful mining is is the running hash rates and running the computation, and who gets cheaper electricity has a better advantage, right? So I think that's where the similarities are. Compared to Singapore and Texas, the heat is the same. The humidity in Singapore is very different, and in the US it's much drier in Texas. In Europe, Europe is still very different in the sense that, just the innovation is strong, but the regulation is much, much stronger. And because of the regulation, it stops innovation. And as a result, it limits the scope of thinking in Europe. So how do we think bigger? Europe has really hard time thinking big because of the regulators and the constant restrictions, and then the geographical borders. They're much smaller countries. And so also that's struggling.
So there's different if you think about who's building. So the engineering talent is quite different. I mentioned more layer ones, let's say in Europe or especially the US. Here there's like, if you take South Korea or Japan, there's more talent that's been building, let's say, on Cosmos. So for good and bad reasons related to Luna and so on, that was one of the Cosmos chains. In Japan, there's in popularity on let's say Avalanche or so, or Aptos. In Singapore itself, I don't know enough yet about the local community here to really identify it with certain development as such. But I'm assuming it's quite similar to the rest of Asia. And yeah, still need to discover the rest of the space, to be honest. But there's how do we grow from there?
For Asia, I think that a lot of the initial user base will be here, especially in emerging markets across Southeast Asia, where the regulation is not as, I would say, limiting as they are, for example, maybe in China or Japan or Korea. But I think that, the user adoption will come here first, and we'll find some really good novel use cases of blockchain or decentralized applications. I think in the US and Europe, there's a lot more emphasis on the regulatory side, on like a very polished, finished product, while there's a lot more users in Asia who are very open on trying new things, even though the user experience might not be polished, especially if there's a way for you to own digital assets that may have significant value.